Gabrielle, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey Brian, thanks for having me. I'm excited here.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you. And I've always been a big fan of yours. I know that we met a month ago, probably. So I've had time to watch your videos and the great things you're doing. So I really appreciate you joining us today. So just to get started, the one of the main themes that's on the bottom here, right? Vulnerability. And I know you faced some adversity over the last 3 or 4 years. And I remember one of our conversations, you said, look, some of this stuff just had to happen
Yes.
to be where I'm at today. And, I've always found that extraordinary people always have a story that I'll ask them and say, hey, how did you get here? What things have you experienced? And there's always this moment in their life, like this changed me. It had to happen in the moment. It wasn't comfortable, but looking back on it, it's something that made me who I am today.
Yeah, definitely. I've been reflecting on the experience that I had a few years ago quite a bit, and um, uh, there have been people who've asked me like, "What is your origin story?" Typically, that question shows up in like a job interview, like like how did you know that you wanted to do that you're doing now? How did you know you're the person who you are now? And I used to start this story off like when I had first gotten into tech sales back in 2015. I had this idea of wow, like there is this person that I can become. There's a professional that I can become, which is a CEO of some organization, and let me start in sales. And CEOs start in sales. 3 years in that mindset, I think all I could think about was how I wasn't amounting up to this idea that I had to manifest for myself. And in that, I just don't think I really thought intentionally and strategically for myself based off of what was most important to me, the person that I am today. And I found myself in an environment that was incredibly inhospitable, like for who I was as a person, right. It's like whether that was all right, hey, you're a young professional with very high ambitions, know your place, or if it's a hey, you're a woman in a male dominated environment, know your place, or if it's hey, you're a person in what is a normative white space, like know your place. I was having these experiences that were incredibly like demoralizing and degrading and hostile at worst. And what ended up happening was I suffered a mental breakdown, a nervous breakdown after kind of repeat offense after repeat offense in one environment that I was in. I it was incredibly hard to go through that. Not only did I have like a nervous breakdown, I also got in trouble with the cops. I had a misdemeanor. I couldn't get a job. I got offers rescinded a few times. And then I had to come home back to Chicago and kind of figure out who was I? What did I want? Like, what did I want to do? Who was I going to be in the situation? And so if I think about kind of the growth that I was forced to go through or to accomplish, it really did turn me into a person who was a lot more mindful about why am I making the decisions that I'm making. It forced me to be more compassionate with myself, and with that, be more compassionate with others. So I think about where I am now, being an SDR manager at like a dream company of mine, like Gong.
Yeah.
Like wow, like I really I wouldn't be able to be in the position that I'm in had I not gone through that experience. And it's because I went through that experience that I found myself into the situation now. So I know that was a little bit of a long-winded answer, but if I think about an experience of hey, listen, I am happier and more fulfilled than I ever have been in my life. I'm doing work that I care about more so than I ever have in my life, and I'm doing it alongside people who are amazing individuals. So like yeah, I might have suffered a great cost, but I wouldn't be here if not.
Yeah, which I think also, when you're mentoring people and coaching people, the vulnerability and the way that you've exceeded is you can say,
Mm-hmm.
share my story with you. And I'm coaching you now, but here's some of the things that I had to go through to get where I'm at today, which I think is just
Yeah.
right. It's that human element that in our lives we've all suffered things similar. However, I think your vulnerability of I want to share it with you because I'm going to lead you and I'm going to coach you. I'm sure like how do
Mm-hmm.
people respond to that?
Ah. Mm, I say most of the time when I'm able to be vulnerable with someone else, that gives them an opportunity or an invitation to be vulnerable themselves. And if I think about what are the gifts of being vulnerable, funny enough, a couple of years ago, I did a series of interviews. I did like 40 or 50 interviews with individuals, where I would just ask them questions about vulnerability. Because I was like, what is it? Like, how do you
Yeah.
do it? What are the models of vulnerability? And more often than not, what I found is that nobody had a model of vulnerability. It was always about being tough and being strong and knowing the answers and having everything figured out. And I was like, that is so irresponsible of us to continue to promote that kind of expectation. I was like, one, if we think about even like a fixed versus a growth mindset, like we're saying, hey, you have to have everything figured out, you're never going to grow, right? So like we're impeding learning and growth in this process of coming off as like super strong or impenetrable or invincible. I'm like, we're not. We're human beings. Like we are sensitive, we're emotional. We have experiences that knock us on our ass. Like this is a
Yeah.
real life experience. I'm like, you are a real person. This is a real experience. And no one should be telling you that you have to be a certain way or feel a certain way about things that are affecting you in that way. And so, in me just like sharing that message with them and me having conviction in that message, because it's a learning that I had to go through myself. What I see is that people feel a lot more confident and comfortable, and they trust me much more as well. So, if I think about being in a position of being a manager, being a leader, what is this? What does this give me access to? Is having a trusting relationship means that I can share insights with them and they might actually be a lot more receptive to it. And also, like they also know that I care. I don't just care about when they're doing very, very well. I also care when they're having their hard times as well.
Yeah.
And I'm able to be relevant in all of those moments. So I think like a big piece here of, embracing vulnerability and also like contextualizing it for ourselves and learning about what are the gifts of vulnerability, what does it give to us. We're now, if we can give that to ourselves, we can give it to other people, and we can become more relevant and we can resonate with more people. And I think especially as leaders, like we have to do that. Like that is like we can't only be relevant to 20% of the people who are on our teams.
Absolutely. And I look behind you and I see the word love. I think that's what you're referring to, right? Like I see it all over your pictures there. So I think that's what you're saying. When we actually had a training this morning with some SDRs and BDRs, and we talked about the powerful word of love. We are like, look,
Mhm.
I'd love to help you, even on a sales call.
Mhm.
I'd love to set up a meeting with you for 30, 45 minutes to learn more about your world. Like, do not make light of the word love and how we're communicating, because it's probably the word in our life that we've heard, as one of our SDRs said this morning, the third word they heard the most in their world, or said, I should say, and heard, mom and dad, then love, right? So it's a word
Mhm. Yep.
I'll relate to. And I think from listening to you, you can tell it's something you're sharing with your team. I'm not here with you to celebrate every month you hit quota. I'm here to help you because I've experienced vulnerability. I've experienced things just
Mhm.
like so. Yeah, we missed the number this month, but what are we going to do next month? I'm in it with you. I'm here for you. You know,
Yes.
vulnerable
Yes.
together.
Yes.
Not just celebrate every time we win, which is fun, but how do you
Mhm.
matches, which really sounds like how you're leading.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a piece where it's not just like love by itself. There's also the unconditional aspect of this. And this is something that I had picked up from one of the trainings that Kevin Dorsey had done in his Patreon group. And he was talking about like there are certain things that you want to see your reps do. Like there's a set of behaviors, right, that you want your reps to align themselves to and adjust to. And so he's like, if we focus on the behaviors and detach from the outcome and focus just on, hey, listen, you're doing a really good job at what I've asked you to do, like the process, the methodology, the inputs, the activities, those kind of things, regardless of the outcome, I'm saying I'm going to celebrate with you because you're doing all the things that are going to matter. It's a little things that matter a lot. But I also think like one of the things that I also extend to the people on my team is I recognize like sometimes demonstrating that unconditional love also means saying, hey, listen, I don't think that this is the right place for you or this is the right role for you.
You
And
know,
I'm going to demonstrate unconditional. I'm like, I'm not going to love you just because you're on my team. I'm also going to demonstrate love and care for you because I know you're really interested in this department or this company and I know somebody there. So even though you're not going to be on my team, the best thing that I can do for you or the way that I can stay true to I'm a steward of your success is to say you define what success is for you, right? And as long
yeah.
as you get there and if I can support you in that, then that is a win all the way around, even if that means that you're no longer on this team or at this company anymore. So it's not just like love and the end, but it's also this, it's not attached or tethered to any one condition. It's just absolute.
Yeah, with LinkedIn and our networks and our relationships today, if someone's not working out, A, they probably know it too, and they want help.
Hmm.
Hey, look, I have a big network. I want to help you. It's unconditional. And let's figure out the right home, right? If it's in the
Yeah,
company or if it's outside the company, I want to help you. And how hard is that today? It's not that difficult
it's
with
not.
networks, but some people jump to, whoa, this is not going to be good. And, it's your last day instead of, hey, we got 2, 4 weeks here. Let's figure it out together, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Best thing
Yeah.
for you. And,
I was going to say a lot of what has allowed me to show up in this way has been to like get right with myself first and foremost. Because if I'm continually projecting onto someone else and I'm not checking my own ego, right? If I'm only thinking about myself, I think that's where like the leader and like the person that they're supporting that's where there can be that disconnect because it's not I'm not being a steward. I'm not being of service to this person, right? I'm in it for my own regard. And I think that's the moment where you stop being a leader. So
yep.
so again, and this is something that I also learned from my very first role in sales. I remember going to my manager and I was the top performing rep and I think I was just being a little cocky at the time. It was like, early on in my career and I was like, hey Dan, like what would you say or what would happen if I told you that I was interviewing at another company? And he just looked at me and he goes, well, I hope you would tell me so that I could help you, right? He's like, whether you wanted me to review your resume or write a recommendation or be a reference, or if you just needed to take time off to go and interview, he's like, I'd much rather you let me know rather than feeling like you had to hide this and
Yeah.
becoming resentful. So his whole thing was like, it's like you could totally be that person who hides and has to like change for their interview in the bathroom and is so stressed out that you bomb the interview and you come back and you're just upset. He's like, I would much rather just be, again, like just be a steward of your success and be a steward of like what success means for you than hold on to my own selfish ambitions. So like that was a tone that got set really, really early on in my career.
I love that. It kind of stems into Gabrielle. I read something else that you had put down on LinkedIn, and I thought it was very interesting, especially in the world we live in right now, where everything's dashboards, everything's KPI.
Hmm.
It's almost like
Yeah.
tech's great, but sometimes we take tech and I feel like abuse it, and we turn
Yes.
every person, everything into, does it hit our Salesforce dashboard? Does it hit our KPIs? And we have a tendency to forget about people, which I'm guilty of that in
Hmm.
the past.
Yeah.
It's the vulnerability coming out in me, right? And then sometimes we have to say, time out. What are we doing? Isn't it about coaching people, helping people? That will happen. That's a result of that. So I read this and, I do not want to take credit for what you published, but you put
Yeah.
we need more coaches, not dashboards. And I remember it just like stuck out. And I had a meeting later that day and I used your quote. I said, look, I didn't make this up. A person that I'm getting ready to interview for the summit said this. It's so true. We're focusing too much on this. We got to get back to, let's talk about the people, right? Could you
Yes.
just like expand on that? Because it really, really like just
Yeah.
touched.
Yeah, it was at the last week of the month, maybe not last month, but in January. My team was at like 67% of the number. And I found myself refreshing the dashboard over and over again. And I think this is honestly, this is 100% the use case for Gong. Is I was looking at the dashboard and I wasn't seeing anything that was actually going to help my team. I was
Yep.
like, yeah, I could 100% tell you to do a bunch of more calls, but I'm like, but you're already doing so many. And I'm like, there's a certain point in time where you do more calls, and I'm like, are they having more conversations though? Are these meaningful conversations? Are they able to capture
Yep.
insights and intelligence? Like what is the quality of these conversations? Because I'm like, otherwise it's just data points. So I'm like, I needed context. And I remember this morning I like woke up at like 2:30 in the morning, probably like stressing about my number. And I really just thought about, I'm like, who do I wish to be in this situation? I was like, I can be the manager who says just do more calls, do more emails, and wash my hands of the situation. And like if they didn't hit it, then that's on them. Boo. But that's not the person that I am. I was like, there's got to be something more to this than just me refreshing a dashboard. So I went
Yep.
into Gong and I just started listening to conversations. And I recognized, I'm like, oh my gosh, there are so many opportunities where, had we asked this one specific question, this person would have hit quota already,
Mm.
right? Or
So
if, it's
interesting.
like, or if it's like, hey, if we had noted and if we had referred back to a certain thing that somebody said and driven urgency around, then a callback, there we go. If we like done a callback and driven urgency around this one piece, right, we probably could have gotten a referral. Or I was like, or you can look through emails and stuff like that. But I was like, if I was just coaching my team up on what they were already doing, we might not actually need more touch points. We would just need better touch points. I'm like, that to me is really the person. Like, that's what I thought. I was like, I just want to be that person. I want to be that manager or that leader who's actually going in, is on the front lines, is side by side with their team, and is providing them relevant information that can actually help them feel a lot better in their role, and doesn't just dismiss them and say, hey, listen, you need to do more activities. I mean, there's a balance, of course, right? If someone's not hitting their number and they're not hitting activities, like that's one situation. But for the folks who are putting in that work and they're hitting those KPIs and they're not getting the conversions that they need, I was like, the worst thing I could probably tell them is to do more calls. That's the absolute worst thing I could probably tell them.
Yep. I remember my first boss, he called me and he said, Brian, people fail for two reasons. And there's only two reasons. Number one is work ethic, and number two is skill deficiencies. As a manager, as long as people work hard, it's your job to help them with their skill deficiencies. People that want to work hard,
Mm,
you can help them get there. And I think that's what you're talking about. People that work
yep.
hard invest our time to help them with their skills. And especially to your point, like you said, they're hitting the metrics. It's probably tweaking some knobs, educating them on some of their calls they made, and stuff like that. And sometimes
Yes.
maybe they're making too many calls and not slowing down, do a little bit more research, right? Things that will change
Yeah.
67% rather than 100%. So it's so good that you're doing that. I love that we need more coaching, not dashboards, because I thought it's so true. Because I do the same thing, refresh. So like it's going to magically change
Yeah.
to 90, right? And we haven't contributed really. We just get caught up in the numbers, right? So I love that.
Yes. Yes.
So, another thing that I know you mentioned is people that want to get into sales, right? And you talk about sports, something, a new
Hmm.
job that they had before sales. And everything really, when you get into sales, it's new when you're starting out. But at the end of the day,
Yes.
you go to the article, the importance of your other experiences and what you've tried. And, at the end of the day, just do not be of experience and lack of sales background. Can you expand on
Hmm.
that a little bit? Because I know you're doing a lot of coaching in that area with new people that maybe it's
Yes.
sales.
Yes. Yeah. So I reflect on my own journey of getting into sales so many times where I'm also I'm part of the hiring process, like the candidate journey over at Gong. So I interview a lot of people, and there are quite a, like, let's say I would imagine a good like 30% of the folks who are coming through the candidate journey at Gong have not had traditional tech sales experience. So that's in an AE role or an SDR role or an account management role. And so one of the things that I've observed with folks is so caught up on all the things that they don't have that they don't
Hmm.
recognize the value of the things they do have. And what I even share with people is I'm like, hey, you listen, if if you always, like I said, if it was a requirement, an absolute requirement for all tech sales positions that you have tech sales experience, nobody would be in tech sales. Like we all start from zero.
Yeah.
So if we just embrace that and we do our work and we recognize, number one, what is our why? Why are we getting into sales? Why are we getting into the SDR roles? Like, for my role, why are we getting into the SDR role specifically? Why are we going to the specific company? How does it support who we are as a person? Whether that's like, in thinking even outside of the financial support, how does it support you in your growth or in your and what you value most? So do you value growth and learning opportunities, but you're going to organizations where the person you're reporting to like doesn't have one-on-ones with you? That's a
Yeah.
misalignment in your values, right? So I always say, like, start off with knowing your why. If you have a really strong why, that to me is undeniable, and hiring managers will notice that. So for my end, I reflect on the experience that I had of getting into sales. One of the exercises that I did was I wrote down, okay, what are my experiences? What are my main takeaways? What have these experiences gifted me? So I thought about my college, like what did I learn in college, right? I was a public policy analysis major. I was like, how does this
Hmm.
apply to sales? I'm like, let me boil, like, what if I boil it down to its simplest parts, it's being able to understand the difference between a problem and an issue, right? So I'm like, okay, I understand how to identify a problem. I had consulting experience as well. I'm like, okay, well, what did I get from consulting experience? It's how to address the problem and how to measure the impact of the solutions that we're providing. Great. And the next thing that I thought about was, okay, where am I going? And what is that bridge in between the experiences that I have and where I'm going? And I was like, cool, this is my why of sales. It's understanding where, like, what do I have? Where am I going? And sales is my bridge. And once I actually knew how to like say that in a message of, hey, tell me about yourself. Like like tell me about your background. That's the story that I told. And that to me opened up so many more doors than trying to come in and say, okay, well, like I was a leader of this and I did this and da, da,
Yeah.
like I'm trying to I'm almost trying to overcompensate. So that's really my approach in terms of how I'm coaching people up is like value what you possess, know where you're going, be okay with the fact that you have a gap, and recognize how sales can help you build that bridge in between where you are today and where you want to be in the future.
Yeah, it's so true. We had a client the other day that interviewed two people. One had sales experience. One, it's her first job trying to get into sales. And I'll never forget. I called the CRO and I said, "Well, who'd you pick?" And he said, "Well, I picked the person I thought I wasn't going to pick." And I'm like, "What do you mean by that?" "Well, I have the resume here with 2 years of experience in sales. And then I have this person that was an Olympic gymnast, had spent 12 hours a day on the mat since she was 5 years old, homeschooled."
Hmm.
I mean, about
Hmm.
discipline, story is like you said, it blew him away. He was like,
Hmm.
"I know I can train this person from her past experiences because she's going to
Yes.
apply it to this new sales role." And it gave
Yes.
me good, right? And he's like, "When I started this,
I got
Brian,
goosebumps when you were telling
I
me
almost
this.
rejected it right away and told you to get someone else, but I didn't know the
Hmm.
story." And I think that's what you're kind of saying is we lean so much on sometimes experience rather than, hey, go back to when you were 7 to 21. Tell me about your life and what things you accomplished. And, if that
Hmm.
interview never came up, on paper, the other person had won, right? But that was the
Listen,
conversation and why he picked, so I just, like you said, you're getting goosebumps. I get goosebumps a day later
Yeah.
because I'm wowed by that story. So,
There's a there's a piece around telling a story, right? I think that's the biggest piece. Again, when I had an experience of like interviewing. It wasn't for sales roles. But I was just interviewing like a mad woman, and I had, let's say, 22 phone screens, and I didn't get past the phone screen. And I was like, okay, I went to a really great school, like I was like, I feel like I've done all the things that I'm supposed to do, and like it's not yielding anything. Like, what's going on here? And once I realized that, like, all right, the resume is what can get me in the door, but I'm the person who has to sell myself. And so for me
yep,
to sell something, I have to believe in it. So I have to see the value in what I'm selling. So, and I have to be able to package this in a way that other folks can easily start to understand and recognize and acknowledge the value as well. So when I thought about, again, like the where am I at today? What do I possess today? Where am I going? And what is that bridge? Like that to me was the template or the framework of how to tell my story in a very cohesive and an intriguing and endearing way as well. 'Cause it's like, oh wow, yeah, like this makes a lot of sense. It's 45 seconds, but even if you think about what is a sales role, even an SDR role, you have maybe 30 seconds to get somebody bought into why should I stay on the phone with you, or why should I continue reading this email. So if we even think about our ability to tell our own story, to advocate for ourselves, to to yeah, to get somebody bought into us, like this is our job, this is the job. So like if we can't
yep,
figure out how to do that in the interview process, and we're wondering why haven't I been able to make it through, it's like it's very practical, right? Very pragmatic. It's
mhm,
like we haven't done a good job, we have not yet figured out how to position our experience in a way that's relevant to this company. So either one, we need to understand like what is what we have to offer valuable. If we know it's true, then maybe we need to learn a little bit more about, okay, well, how do I adjust my positioning? How do I make this a little bit more cohesive, right? How do I make this a little bit more
yeah,
coherent? How do I tell it in a way where I'm excited and I'm not as nervous? Maybe I need to practice my pitch a bit more. But I mean, these are just little tiny things that I think that people can do to really move the needle in their interview experience, especially if they don't have the traditional sales experience.
yeah, and I think that even goes back to what you're saying is vulnerability. The best
Hmm.
interview is when someone comes in and, I almost get scared when everything is scripted and it's the perfect answer and I can't
Mm,
find one wrong. I get scared, right? I'm like, there's got to be
mm,
more. What's the background? I almost love the interviews where someone comes in and says, let me tell you how I've learned in life and why I'm going to another level in life. And let me
yes.
tell you, like this gymnast, right? Like, let me tell you the story of why I believe I'll be
Hmm.
successful. And there's
Mm,
vulnerability and there's, for me, I relate to people better like that because I know everyone has a story. It's not perfect. So tell me a little bit
yep.
about that. And then I really cringe when somebody takes that and turns it into their biggest positive. Like the time I struggle the most, it's actually a positive situation, right? And they turn it into this huge
Mm.
rather than, no, let me just tell you the truth. Right.
Let
And
me just tell you. So yeah, if I relate this back to getting into sales, right? So I mean, there's a use case for this. Not to make everything about use cases, but I think it's to build on the urgency or share. This is why this is important. Um, my honest belief is like your yeah, like your voice, your personality, your story, right, can be your biggest differentiator. Nobody else is you. So if you're over here sharing scripted canned answers, number one is like if I'm a hiring manager, I'm like, all right, I've heard 30 other people say this exact same thing. I'm
yeah,
bored. Right. And then I
yeah,
think about, okay, well, what is the prospect going to feel? Right. If I feel this way, can I responsibly put somebody in a seat to go and bore someone else? It's not to say that that person is boring, but their answers are, right? So I'm like, I would
yeah,
much, so that's one piece of it. But another thing of when someone says, hey, like, here, very confident in my abilities to do this. while I might have shortcomings in these areas, like here's what I've learned over time. And I still have some gaps, but here's how I can partner with you. I go, oh, this person is really self aware. And so I'm
Yes.
like, if this person is really self aware and they can proactively surface up challenges and roadblocks that they're having, that's less work that I have to do as a manager and figuring things out on their behalf. I was like, this is going to be a person who is going to seek feedback, who's going to seek a constructive feedback, or probably yeah, so like they're gonna seek feedback and probably take action on it a lot faster than someone who's going to wait around. So I think this piece
Yep.
around, I mean, there's there the what vulnerability allows or gifts a person is the ability to become that much more self-aware, because you say, hey, listen, like here's an area that I'm not doing very well in. I recognize that that might be seen as a shortcoming, but I'm going to accept it and embrace it nonetheless, because the sooner that I accept my shortcomings, the faster I can find my way over them, around them, or like build it, or create
Yeah.
a new way of approaching them that's a lot more effective. So again, I think this vulnerability piece, it really comes back to, I'm going to keep an open mind and an open heart, and I'm going to embrace I'm going to embrace like the mystery of this experience called life before me. And as I embrace all of it, that means like, yes, I embrace the things that might be the hardest to embrace, but I also have the ability to embrace way more than I ever thought was possible for myself. So I really do believe like this vulnerability piece, especially when it comes to it's an interview experience or even you're in the seat, it's being okay and saying, listen, I bombed this month. Like I absolutely bombed this month,
Yep.
but I leaned into that. I didn't run away from it, and I can start to see what was my part in this. I didn't prepare myself. Like I woke up, like my first meeting was at 8 and I woke up at 7:30 every day. I didn't actually prep myself to be successful. And this is why I'm seeing what I'm seeing today. So here are the specific things that I'm going to change moving forward to put myself in a much better position to be successful. And hey, manager, hey, whoever else it is, right? Here's how I see you really helping me along the way with this. Like, what do you think? Or where might there be gaps in my plan? It's like, holy crap, this person
Yep.
is really like they are demonstrating that they are about doing this work. Like, and they're open, again, they're open to my feedback too.
Yep.
So this is the big piece. Like they're receptive and open mind, finding a new way. And I think that is really what's the most beautiful thing.
Movement of SDRs, BDRs are just as important as an account executive or an enterprise sales
Mm-hmm.
rep, because everyone's starting to understand we need each other to flourish
Yes.
together. And
Yes.
it's 8 years ago, it was like, "What is it?" And now this movement, and I know you're, like, on the front end of that, and you're building teams. I would love just to hear a little bit from you on that movement and how it's feeling and how the marketplace with Gong, right, just flourishing in these times with SDRs.
Yeah, I mean, I got into tech sales as an SDR in 2015, so it's been 6 years, and
Yep.
uh, so yeah, I feel like I was like having a conversation with someone earlier this week or sometime in the past 7 days, and I was like, when I was an SDR, there was no content. Like Morgan Ingram's SDR Chronicles was the only content for SDRs.
And by the
So
way, I
I keep
love
it
him.
to world.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he's awesome. He is awesome. Yeah, so yeah, when I was in SDR, like there were no resources for SDRs. Like you had companies who were investing into sales development. There was Aaron Ross's predictable revenue model, which at the time that I started as an SDR was still like probably 10 years old still. So like it's not to say
Yeah.
that sales development and business development were in the context of generating pipeline and finding qualified opportunities. Like it's not new to the past 10 years. I think it's grown to be very prolific, and you have an entire like category of technologies like outreach and sales software that are built around it. So some of the things that I've seen, like, I mean, yes, there's a movement, but I also, let me call this out. I'm going to call this out because what I've seen a lot more recently is there's been more conversations around like full cycle AE. And I think there are some folks who
Mhm.
are saying, hey, AEs should not, there's one end of the spectrum, which I agree with, which is like I've gone into tech companies, like most of the time I've been working at startups, and we hire an AE from these like large, like an Oracle, SAP kind of company where they didn't have to do any prospecting whatsoever. And they come and they go, where are my leads? And I'm like, yo, bro, you're on my naughty list. Like, you're getting no opportunities because because I'm like, because this is not actually a partnership, right? And so there's
No.
like that end of the spectrum of like, hey, full cycle or AEs should know how to prospect. I think there's an end of the conversation though that says, hey, we should get rid of the SDR role altogether and only have full cycle AEs. And I understand there's some parts of the argument that say, hey, SDR, it doesn't help an SDR to not have exposure to that side of the sales motion. So that one to me is triggering. I've actually seen a lot more of those conversations happening. And here's my thought on this is a sales development program doesn't work for every company. Number one, leaders have to be bought into the SDR model. Every company that I've been
Yep.
at that has a leader who does not see the value in sales development, that sales development team gets gone very quickly, regardless of their results. That have of leadership. Leadership did not believe, despite the numbers, did not believe in the value of sales development. So the sales development team did not flourish, right? The sales team did not flourish either. So I really do think you have to, like, in order to have a sales development program, leadership at the highest levels of the organization really has to believe and recognize the value of a sales development rep. The value of a sales development rep is not just in, hey, listen, you are a specialized SDR role and that's where you'll be and where you'll always be. The value really comes in, at least what I've seen is when you have an organization that is valuing learning, development, and growth and enabling people to make career transitions from the SDR role. So whether you call that a feeder pool or an incubator program, whatever else it is, but it's like, hey, like this is a place where you can get exposure to the business, you can get exposure to customer conversations. You cut your teeth in prospecting. Is it a very challenging role? 100%. We recognize that, we acknowledge that, and we appreciate that, and we recognize that your contributions are exactly what's going to help fuel our growth as an organization. If that mindset and if that point of view does not exist, right, within the
Yep.
people who are leading the team, the sales program is not going to work. So I do think there are requirements, right? Like it's almost like, not every single person on the planet should be a parent, right? So like not
Yeah.
every single organization in the world should have a sales development team much in that same
Yeah.
way. And I think a lot of the economics of sales development starts to show up again when organizations they're keen on enabling their SDRs to make career transitions. So whether that's an AE position, a CS position, a sales enablement, whatever the position is, like that's where you actually get to see, oh wow, like we're able to hire SDRs who move into AE positions, and we don't have to accumulate the cost associated with external hires. So, like, that to me is when the economics of sales development really makes sense. So, again, if a company is not looking to facilitate that kind of career growth, I think that's a robbed opportunity for the company as well as for the SDR. And I'm going to get
Yep.
off my high horse now.
No, I love that. Also, I agree with you completely. If you don't have like a good career pathing program where people can actually see it, and I'm not saying, some companies talk about it, but then you don't
hmm
see it. But if you have a
hmm
program where you're moving from an SDR to an account executive to management, whatever that career path looks like in an organization, I think it's just fair to be able, even during the interview stage, to say, turn a piece of paper around or whatever and say, here's our career pathing program within our company. Just so you know, as
hmm
you do really well, there's many spots in this organization that you could grow into. And I think that's fair when
hmm
people ask the question. Like I remember interviewing 20 years ago, if you ever said, hey, I just want to know in my first 2 years, if I perform, what's next or what happens in a year from now. If I hit all my metrics and I blow my number out, and people would say, whoa, 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 you just need to get here and work hard. Right.
Yeah.
But what does the
Yeah.
career look like if I do those things? Because I think it's a great question. What you're really asking is, I want to be here long term. Can you explain it to me if I
Yes.
perform what that looks like in advance? Why is that
Yeah.
such great question, right? Well, Gabrielle, this has been awesome. You're unbelievable. Thank you for sharing like your adversity and your vulnerability. And I can tell why you are helping so many people. And like to me, you're just extraordinary. It's just great to hear your stories, your insight, and just like how you're helping people. So this has just been like awesome for me. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Brian. Thanks for inviting me on here and for, yeah, asking the questions and for doing the research. And yeah, this has been awesome. And I can't wait for us to talk again.